We're pleased to welcome now Senator Daniel Sparks. He represents District 5 in Mississippi. That incorporates Itawamba, Prentiss, and Tishomingo counties. Serves as the chair of the Economic and Workforce Development Committee, vice chair of Judd B. Is that still current?
That is correct.
Okay, Senator, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Good to be with you, Gerard. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So I always got to brag on your part of the world up there in northeast Mississippi. It is unique, it's scenic, it's beautiful, and especially the J.P. Coleman State Park and the big lake there is just breathtaking.
We're very fortunate. Obviously, you've got Pickwick there with J.P. Coleman, and then just down the way a bit, you've got Tishomingo State Park, and then you've got on the waterway, you've got Bay Springs. So we're blessed to have a lot of folks coming up, a lot of fishing tournaments, a lot of bass tournaments that you see. But it is a beautiful part of the world, and of course, I served on a Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks Committee my first 4 years, and we're still working hard to try to get the investment into those parks to continue to maintain. Of course, it's the beauty piece that's the most impressive. But in today's world, if you've been talking about technology this morning, is you want to have it to where it's user-friendly. We built, I think it was about 30 RV pads at Tishomingo State Park recently that is more equipped to use the equipment you're using today, because the pop-up camper of the 70s and 80s, today people are wanting to roll in their RV, and we want them to come and stay a while.
Yeah, good point. Well, it's a beautiful part of the state. And I know that even though you guys are out of session, you're still doing a lot of work as a state senator outside between the sessions.
Well, I think coming from the background, and my dad and both grandfathers were preachers, I think it's almost revival time sometimes when we move across the state. I had a chance to speak to Create on Friday up in northeast Mississippi. That's 17 counties in north and northeast Mississippi. I have the opportunity to speak tomorrow at the Horizons Conference with Mississippi Accelerate. The SWIB board meets at 1. Chairman Zuber in the House has been kind enough to invite me to his PERS committee meeting tomorrow at 2. So I really do appreciate those opportunities. I've spoken at the Supervisors Convention this year with MDA, particularly with MEDC, getting to meet all our economic development partners from across the state. I think it was down in Biloxi last month maybe. And you learn those things, because a lot of times when you get ready to craft legislation, you may have an idea. It may not be a terrible idea, but if you do not vet it through people that it's going to impact, there's unintended consequences, or there's a better way to do it, a more efficient way to do it. But the site development grants, things of that magnitude, the investment that we've made across the state of Mississippi for the last decade or more, I think that's part of the reason we've had the successes we've had, the announcements that we've had.
I agree. Paying dividends, the SDG grants, no doubt, and the governor's been a huge champion of that. He realizes that that's key, and as you know, in economic development, when a suitor is considering a site, they want it to be pretty close to the point where they can put a shovel in the ground and get the project underway. The speed to market is becoming a huge deciding factor, and having these sites ready to go and all resourced up with all the infrastructure assets that they need to get their business idea going is certainly critical.
You're very correct on that. And the opportunity we had to go the November, I think, before the session that the Marshall County project was announced, and to go to that site, put your feet on the ground, to listen to the presentation, see the issues they already had with ingress and egress at that industrial park. When you come down and then you're having to vote, particularly to spend tax dollars, that you recognize the value of it, and that it is an investment. These are, there have been projects over the years that didn't work out, and for whatever reasons that were there, and we try to learn from those examples, but also, we expect partnership with industry, and the conversations you've had this morning even are that deal around the cost of utilities. Yes, we want you to come, and why are we having successes? I think it is because of good tax policy, regulatory policy, the availability of utilities, but there is quite a bit of discussion and concern, particularly around water and around electricity. TVA is, of course, a partner in North Mississippi. that we rely on for energy cost, and that's one of the reasons we've had a lot of success in North Mississippi is the cost of energy. We've been able to be very competitive, but they are partnering, and I saw an article yesterday with Carios, I believe, starts with a K, and Google, and they're about to build, I think it's 50 meg generation, and or at least that's the commitment TVA's made to buy from them, which provides the revenue stream to make the investment into nuclear. And I've heard Commissioner Brown with the Public Service Commissioner talk about, probably even with you on the show, about the modular nuclear, and had a chance to talk with Bill Rennick with TVA at the meeting Friday, and he was able to express some of the investment they're making. So TVA is leading the way, and we want to make sure that we replicate, because the first guy to build it, the cost is great.
No doubt.
But they get better, and they get more efficient, and that's what we need.
Yeah, so it's Google and Carios that did an agreement to essentially increase the amount of nuclear power across the country, and much of that's needed to power their data centers and their efforts as well. But yeah, TVA I think is going to buy like 50 megawatts from them, is the way it works. So they're incorporating more nuclear into the grid that they operate. That's the main thing TVA is. So. And
we have to build capacity, but one of the things with the modular nuclear or any kind of nuclear is you can have all the fancy cars in the world, but if you have no road or interstate to drive them on, you're in trouble. So it's transmission also. So the more you can build on-site or near-site of large energy users, whether it's a manufacturing facility or whether it's a data center, that's part of the benefit too, is that you are not having to grow transmission.
Yeah, they say that that particular reactor will produce enough electricity to power 36,000 homes, but the electricity that but they've got that covered. So this will power Google's data centers in Montgomery County, Tennessee, and Jackson County, Alabama. So a great collaborative effort there between the consumer of the electricity and the provider of it, and a third party that's big time into standing up these nuclear power plants. So I believe that's the future. The good news, Senator, in our state, I think our legislature is supportive of nuclear energy. Our Public Service Commission, I've interviewed them as well, Chris Brown and DeKeither Stamps of late. They seem to be on board. So the sky's open, and I think our power companies, Mississippi Power, TVA, Entergy, they're all supportive of that as well. So I think that bodes well for us.
It does, and we have a federal administration at this time that is willing to look at it. And one of the most difficult things, and I made this comment even before I knew Mr. Rennick was in the room or had noticed he was in the room, is that TVA has unique circumstances because of, from administration to administration and the board appointments, they have some challenges that Mississippi Power or Entergy maybe do not face. And so I'm very encouraged, but I don't want to see work done in this administration that again is forward-looking. Whether it's the permitting process, getting the technology right, I don't want to come back and see us take a step backwards, because the needs are growing, not receding.
Well, and you're right, and the governor, of course, has created this commission that is for the purpose of just making sure that we're preparing for the energy needs of our future. And I think he's appointed a cross-section of subject matter expertise to serve on that committee. The president has made it very clear he understands the need as well, and he's got cabinet secretaries that run these various agencies that are trying to strip down some of this onerous permitting and regulations that honestly are stifling the growth of energy in this country.
That's correct, and we want the resources. We need the resources again, and I think the governor with the Power Play initiative and others is forward-looking. And to his credit, it is forward-looking past the term of his administration. And I think you measure leadership and you measure people's impact not just by what they do when they're in the office, but how they prepare the state or the city or the county or the nation for the future, because you have today's issues. From a constituent services side, if you're a local elected official, you have people who have very basic and important needs from a administration or agency standpoint, and you're able to step in and do that. Or you handle a law that's coming up, but more impactful is what you do that's going to impact future generations and set yourself up for success. And some of the things we've been able to do the last couple of years is not any work I've done. It's been the work that was done before I got there, and we want to build build on it and add to it.
That's a good point. Appreciate you pointing that out as well. We got Senator Daniel Sparks in the Element Well studio. We come back and we'll dig into stuff you guys may be talking about when you gather again under the Capitol here pretty soon, under the dome in the Capitol pretty soon. Daniel Sparks is a senator from Northeast Mississippi. We're coming right back with more with the senators. Off track there, Senator, but I want to address that Wally Senate from CC, and I appreciate his concerns. You guys know that as well in the legislature. And you know what happened this past year? A bunch of members of the House and Senate introduced various pieces of legislation. It was kind of a patchwork to regulate artificial intelligence at the state level. And I think the legislature and the governor were wise to say, let's step back for a minute here before we go do something that would stifle or stymie innovation or even create more problems if we pass laws without really thinking through it. And they created this task force. I'm honored, I'm privileged, blessed to be appointed to it, along with some other smart people in our state. And that's how we're going to handle this.
Well, and I think that's excellent. What we need to do is engage with people that understand the issue, and God bless the young people that are going to come into this space, particularly as it relates to the Department of Defense, protecting our financial information. I mean, the attacks that will come are not going to be so much from, planes and ships and things of that nature. This is where it's at. And I'll have to admit, I'm kind of at the tipping point. I'm at that age where I had an Atari 2600. So I remember the wood grain and playing Space Invaders with my brother. And it was amazing technology. But I also am the type guy that wants Microsoft OneDrive to stop trying to update me because I just want to get into Excel or Word and write my letter and no, I do not want your help. But I realize that there is value. And in one of these days, I'll capture where that value is. But right now, it's causing me a little bit of heartburn.
Is it Copilot?
I'm like, I don't need a Copilot, brother. I'm writing this letter. So, but yes, I can see the concern, especially generation to generation.
Yeah.
But this young generation is going to lead, and sometimes that's the hardest thing to do in leadership. Is let new leadership lead in an area where you don't have expertise.
Yeah. So the hope is we have our first meeting coming up at the end of September up at Mississippi State, our task force. And then I just got an email about scheduling a second one. So maybe we'll have 2 to 3 meetings before the session gets underway, and we'll have some information to share with the legislature as a guide, for lawmakers to figure out how to handle this. I'm honestly glad that the provision that I was unhappy about, introduced by Senator Ted Cruz in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which would have prohibited states from implementing any regulations for 10 years, a moratorium on that. I'm glad they got stripped out in the Senate. Senator Marsha Blackburn, as a matter of fact, who fought that. Thought that was a bad idea. And, of course, her state's one that has already implemented some regulations. They've got lots of performing artists, of course, in the Nashville area. And protecting their likeness and their proprietary person, if you will, their voice is important because that's a candidate for AI to replicate and to produce income from. And they're entitled to protect that personal asset. That's just one example of a negative use of it. But nonetheless, we now at the state level do have the power, the runway to take action as we see fit here in the state of Mississippi.
That's correct. And one of the things, and I'll go back to the voice, we have 2 of the most distinguished voices in the country in the late James Earl Jones and Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
Their voice is so recognizable in the value it has. And Senator Bradford Blackman actually dropped a bill for a couple of years, which I supported because I'm thinking about now the estate of James Earl Jones or Morgan Freeman. They have built value, and we should never take their value away from them or their family. It should go to where they want it to go. So, yes, there are things out there that we need to look at, but certainly with the understanding.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so I'm glad that the path has been cleared for the states to take action. I just get nervous when the federal government tries to do a one-size-fits-all solution. And I'm a little disappointed in Senator Cruz for introducing that. That seems to be inconsistent with his typical values. I get it. He's concerned that this thing's going to get away from us before we have a chance to do anything about it. But that's where we are. Let's turn our attention to legislative matters here at home. You, as a lawmaker in the state Senate, we had an interesting session in 2025. I'll describe it that way. maybe some unfinished business on both sides that you guys will tackle when you get back under the dome in 26? What's on your mind there?
One of the biggest things that we'll continue to look at is workforce, which, of course, being the chair of Economic Workforce Development, working with MDA, working with Accelerate Mississippi to try to continue to focus on high-wage, high-demand jobs, especially in this cutting-edge technology space. That's a major focus. And also, we had the one-door policy task force this year, which I'm co-chairing with Chairman Donnie Bell from the House, is we're trying to make sure that government is operating in a manner that actually facilitates success, not perpetuates reliance. That's the big thing. If somebody walks in and says, I need help, whether it's SNAP benefits, whether it's Medicaid eligibility, whatever it may be, if we're not careful, we end up just checking the boxes of do you qualify. We do not dig behind to say, why are you in this condition and position, and what can we do to help you get to self-reliance? And we're dealing mostly with executive agencies. I appreciate the encouragement from the governor's office in relation to what we're trying to do, and have some synergy. Yeah. That if someone comes in seeking a benefit, that we do not just judge whether they qualify, put them on it until it expires, but actually say, is there potential to do better? Some people are in circumstances in life, whether it's disabilities, whether it's other factors, that there is reliance that's there, and we want to help those that cannot help themselves. But we do not want to create a system that them being good economic actors say, well, there's a benefits cliff out here. I'm getting these amount of benefits. You want me to excel to the next level, but if I excel in your eyes to the next level of wage, I actually lose total income to the household. Well, we expect them to be good economic actors, but we have to build a system that does not perpetuate that actually gives them the opportunity to rise out of it.
Okay, good. It's good points. The Medicaid program, you mentioned that, is one that received lots of reforms in the big, beautiful bill at the federal level. Most of those provisions really don't apply to the state of Mississippi because they're applicable to the expansion coverage group, which we didn't do here in Mississippi. Have you guys talked about that? Are there some concerns, budgetary concerns there?
I think the budgetary concerns were evident at the end of the session when the Senate's position was we need to wait and see what is coming out of the federal government, because it was a lot of change. It was a lot to absorb. And we do have rainy day funds. We do have CapEx monies that's out there. And, yes, we want to invest those or return those or do what is proper with those. But you have to have a realization that if you expect your expenses to go up in the future, you either have to have money to pay for that or you have to cut those expenses. And what I hope we can do is have more efficiency in the core functions of government. It's not the poor functions of government, it's the core functions. And sometimes we do a poor job in doing those, but we're going to have to do more with less. Part of that is innovation and technology. That's how you do it. So the government's slow to roll to that, but we've got to embrace it and try to work toward it.
You got to go. You can hang around.
I'd love to hang around.
All right, we got Senator Daniel Sparks in the Element Well studio. We'll continue this discussion. We're coming right Well studio. We're visiting with Senator Daniel Sparks. All right, so Senator, you guys finished out the session this past year. Got this big tax reform bill through. A lot of controversy surrounding that legislation with a drafting error, but nonetheless, I call it an error. I don't think that was what was intended on the Senate side, to implement some so-called triggers that the state would need to achieve before further reductions could be made to the state income tax in increments over a period of time. So unfortunately, that at least from the Senate's perspective, that went down with this decimal point out of place, and that's what it is. I'm just going to ask you straight up, are you concerned that down the road we may have a budgetary problem in state government simply because we're eliminating a considerable amount of income from the income tax? I don't really see too much in the way of reducing expenses, spending certainly not sufficient to offset the loss of that revenue. I'm sort of feeling like 4 or 5 years down the road, you guys may have to make some tough decisions. What do you think?
Well, first of all, the bill itself tracks what we did in 22, because for the next 4 years we'll go from 4 to 3, very much like we went from 5 to 4.
Yeah.
And I think that from the Senate standpoint, there was no real pushback on elimination. It was just, how do you get there? And of course, the plans that were being put out there, we're not going to get there any faster than eliminating a point a year, really. Anyway. But there is obviously concern when you eliminate $1.8 to $2 billion of a $7.2 to $7.6 billion revenue stream. That's a big number. I think the continued growth that we see across the state, the investment that we're seeing, we're definitely going to see an offset in that. There's some offset in that people are going to spend more money. I get that. But I do want us to focus on accountabilities and efficiencies, and I preach this over and over again. On the workforce side, it's return on investment. So we do need to be better as a state in looking at where we are spending and what's happening. The other thing in that bill, and the focus that was on the decimal point, was what was lost in that is that there's a first trigger, and that first trigger is that you have a full rainy day fund. So if it comes to the point that the government has a shortfall, it will be up particularly to the executive branch at that point whether they're going to dip into the rainy day fund. And if they dip into the rainy day fund, that's a sign that you've had to dip into your savings, that you're not meeting the criteria. The trigger will not go into effect the next year. So
that's a good point.
I told folks I'm not overly concerned about the trigger situation. I think Chairman Harkins explained it as clear as a bell. I think it was understood. What ultimately happened, and that's in the rearview mirror, and we'll move forward.
All right. Well, that's fair enough. I think in terms of, and look, you know me, I'm for eliminating the income tax. I always felt like that could be done in an expeditious and efficient manner if we raise money elsewhere, and that's mainly at the state level from sales taxes, which is our primary revenue generation source. It's about 38% last I checked of total revenue. Sales income taxes are about 27%. So we're going to have to spend a whole lot more money as Mississippians to generate sufficient sales taxes to offset the income tax loss.
That's right. And we've spent general fund dollars on things that were maybe specific, and that was one piece of the bill with the infrastructure piece that, we just had a static gas tax that had been in place for almost 40 years. And seeing that we did that, and I spoke with Al Miller with the Trucking Association recently, and they were appreciative that we phased it in so that their industry could absorb, because they have contracts. But that's generating millions and millions more dollars that will go into maintaining our roads. We still have to deal with capacity. We've not bonded in years. We've paid off over $1 billion in bond indebtedness. So we forget how government was run prior to 2020. It seems like is that you borrowed money for major investment, just like you do in your own business and your own home, but you don't want to borrow money for one-time pet projects. And so with what we've done with infrastructure, that's a stream of revenue that is dedicated, that is not going to have to come out of the general fund for maintenance. So there are some major million-dollar pieces, hundreds of million-dollar pieces that will impact what you're expensing in the future.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. So you got some revenue because you guys have been cutting checks to transportation the last couple of years, right?
That's correct. Even on the maintenance side, of course, ARPA skewed everything. So we're getting a year or two away, and that was the other thing with income tax elimination. We've been living high on the hog, if you will, on ARPA dollars and federal dollars that we know are being cut. Is that hopefully we make good investments. I think the infrastructure piece where we use cities and counties as an opportunity to match them 1-to-1 or even 2-to-1 in the smaller municipalities. In my district, I just want to thank my mayors and boards of aldermen because they took advantage of that. In Belmont, they got $400,000 of their direct money from the federal government. Lieutenant Governor wanted to do a match program. They did 2-to-1 for anybody that received less than $1 million. They did $1.2 million worth of water and sewer work that did not come out of the Belmont, municipal budget.
Yeah, their standard budget.
And so they were able to make future investment, so they're not going to have to spend that dollar. So I think that was a big good thing that we did, and a lot of people across the state did.
Got you.
So that's part of the focus. But yes, it's going to get serious as we move forward. But as a conservative, we want to do more with less, and we do want to cut. And sometimes the only way to cut spending is to cut off the waterfall of money that's coming in that people that overspend.
Right. Yeah, get it. And that's certainly common. and that was a shot in the arm that was received from the federal government. Unfortunately, that just tacked onto our debt, so that's the downside of that. All right, let's talk about the public employees retirement system. You mentioned that you're scheduled to attend an event that I guess was scheduled by Representative Hank Zuber. He, of course, chairs the State Affairs, I think,
that's correct,
committee over there in the House, so this would be of interest to him. What's going on there? A lot of feedback on the Tier 5 that you were instrumental in getting through the legislature this year.
Yes, the Tier 5, of course, it goes into effect March 1st of 2026, and again, it does nothing to any prior tiers, Tier 1 through 4. Their benefits are locked, service credits, et cetera, guaranteed. It was something the PERS board had asked for the last couple of years. The plan that was put together was presented to them. They voted 8-1 to endorse, or at least say, yeah, that's the plan. We've had feedback, particularly from the law enforcement community. I've had meetings one-on-one. We'll have more of those meetings to try to address specific issues they have with the years of service. We did put into the plan, and people ask me, what did you change from what the PERS board voted on? I changed two things, and the Lieutenant Governor went in and met with him after I'd read the draft. And one was they'd remove military service credit. We reinstituted 4 years active duty military service credit. I think that's appropriate. I think it's proper. And in the law enforcement community, 30 to 40% of their hires come out of the military. So that's a benefit that is unique to them that will allow, a 31-year retirement, if you will. And then the second piece that I put back in, first of all, the military service credit I think was very important. The second is there was no term of years in the draft that came through PERS.
Okay.
I feel like, and I felt like, and I said to the Lieutenant Governor, and he agreed, that if someone has given 35 years to the state, if they went to work for MDOT at 18, 19 years of age, if they want to retire after giving 35 years, it shouldn't be an age-driven thing. Because when you talk about a retirement system, retirement to me is ceasing work. Now, that may be a odd way to look at retirement, but my dad's 79, still going strong, and I'm not sure he wouldn't start a new business tomorrow. It's just kind of in the DNA. But when you talk about retirement, a lot of what is happening is people in their 40s or 50s, people younger than me, are, quote, retiring. And they're beginning their check to be drawn, which is fine.
Yeah.
But then they're having to go out and get a job because they have to have benefits. One of the things we want to do this year is a return-to-work policy that is less cumbersome. We have this 25% of your high 4 or 50% work, 50% pay. If people want to work, and they're under the rules of Tier 1 through 4, so if they want to retire, that's their right to retire and begin that check and begin that part of their life. But why would we keep them from coming back with that level of expertise at some level at a local municipality or a school district or law enforcement? So that is one key piece for me this year, is a cleaner, simpler return-to-work policy that is positive impact to PERS, but it's positive impact to the employee, and most of all, it's positive impact to the people that they serve. The other piece is funding. Last year, there was commentary there was not a dedicated funding source. Well, we made amendments and adjustments that do generate hundreds of millions of dollars with things that we did. I want to see a lump sum. I want to see an annual amount go in. I'd like to see a large lump sum because then we get the growth off of it. So putting in $1 billion over 10 years, $100 million a year would be great.
Yeah.
But better would be putting in $500 million in year one and $50 million for the next 10 years. So that's a
put that
key
money
focus.
To work right
that's
off the
right.
bat.
It'd be growing, and by the time you got to year 10, your growth would be hundreds of millions of dollars more. But the good thing is investment returns have been good. We were close to 11%.
Yeah, the treasurer talked about that.
The anticipated rate 7%. We keep doing that, we're going to make positive impact. But everything we've done is a positive impact to the system to honor the obligation that we have to all these employees today and in the future.
Senator Daniel Sparks has been our guest. Thanks for coming in, as always, Senator.
Thank you so much for having me.